Henry woke early on the day of the ceremony, pressed his blue shirt with slow, careful hands, and tied the striped tie his sister had once said made him look like a councilman, then checked the time twice because he did not like to be late. He took his apartment keys, his Metro card, and the small gift bag with a pen and a folded card, and stepped into the warm Washington, D.C. morning where buses sighed and pigeons argued over a crust by the curb. He rode the Green Line from Columbia Heights toward the school gym in Northeast, counting the stations like mile markers. Georgia Ave Petworth, Columbia Heights, U Street, then a transfer, then farther east, letting the train rock him while he kept his breathing even and his thoughts plain. He told himself he would clap when the names were read. He would smile for photos if asked, and he would go home quietly when it was over, like he had done for 15 years of school concerts and report card nights and weekend practices, always on time, always steady. The gym smelled like new varnish and old popcorn, banners with the school colors hung above the backboard, a big fan turned somewhere high overhead, and families packed the bleachers with flowers, balloons, and camera phones held high. Henry chose a seat on the back row where he could stand up easily if his hips argued with him, set the gift bag at his feet, and folded his hands on his knees. He saw Renee near the front in a bright dress, hair perfect, laughter too loud, and he saw Kay. Everyone called his adopted boy Kay now, straightened the mortarboard on his head with a grin that drew attention like a porch light draws moths. Carl, the man who had given Kay his eyes but not his shoes, stood 3 rows ahead and waved like a politician who wanted applause without doing the work. The principal spoke. The band stumbled through a march that made the cymbals late, and then the names began. Henry clapped for each one, even the ones he did not know, because finishing a thing matters. When Kay's row stood, Henry felt his chest rise and fall in a measured way, the way he learned to breathe the night he sat upright in a hospital chair during Kay's second-grade asthma scare. Kay reached the steps, touched the mic, and looked out over the packed bleachers like a singer about to hit the big note. Renee stood from her seat and drifted toward the side aisle, ready for a photo angle. Carl moved closer, lip curled in a smile that said he liked how the stage lights made him important. Kay cleared his throat and said, "We want to thank the man who gave us life, our real dad, not the loser who just paid the bills." And even before the word loser reached the back wall, a gray hush fell, a ripple of uncomfortable coughs and low "oh" sounds. And the woman in the blue hat 2 rows over turned to see who had just paid the bills and found Henry sitting still as stone, eyes on the banner that read Class of 2025, face without a twitch, because he knew if one muscle moved, they might all move, and he would not give them that. He made himself study a loose wire above the hoop, watch it sway in the air from the great fan, pretend he needed to see if it might fall, so he would not look at Renee's practiced smile, or Carl's satisfied nod, or Kay's broad grin, as he threw an arm around a man who had not shown up for the science fair, the braces consult, the flu shot, the midnight math panic, or the late fee at the library. Henry remembered a modest paycheck stretched like rubber, a winter coat bought on clearance in July, a broken laptop fixed with a YouTube video, a Pinewood Derby car sanded with patience and a kitchen towel. He let each memory pass without heat, like cars at a 4-way stop that all knew whose turn it was. He clapped once when the principal moved on because everyone else did, then lowered his hands again and waited for the music to cover the awkward pieces of the morning. After the recessional, when caps went up and the band tried to play loud enough to sound confident, Henry rose carefully, smoothed his shirt, and picked up the gift bag. He walked to the edge of the picture crowd where Renee pulled Kay into frames with the kind of smile that says the story is perfect if you crop it right. Carl took a paper crown from a laughing cousin and put it on his own head. Someone shouted, "Wear it, Dad," and Henry heard the word land like a dime in a jar that was already full. He waited for a space, stepped to the gift table, set the bag there with its neat card. "Proud of you. Keep going." And the fountain pen he had saved for, then stepped back. A student volunteer with a camera asked, "Sir, do you want me to get one of you and your family?" And Henry smiled kindly and shook his head because he would not force himself into a frame that had already chosen its borders. Outside, the June sun pressed warm on the pavement, and the smell of grilled onions from a food cart drifted across the street. Henry took the bus rather than the train because the bus moved slower, and he wanted to watch the city. He saw a boy try to keep his cap on in the wind, a grandmother hold lilies like they were light, a father in a work shirt wipe his eyes with the back of his wrist and laugh at himself. It made him feel calm to see joy that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with patience meeting a finish line. At home, the apartment greeted him with its quiet. A fern leaning toward the good window, a framed photo from the Smithsonian carousel. Renee had printed those matching Team Henry shirts that year. He had paid for the day, and the shirts and the hot pretzels and the bus passes. And a book left open on the arm of his chair, as if a younger man had just stood up and would be right back. He put water on for tea, stood in the doorway while the kettle thought about whistling, and looked down the hallway to the closet shelf where the metal safe sat behind a stack of towels. He did not open it yet, not because he didn't remember the 6 digits or the weight of the envelope inside, but because he understood that decisions made in a rush sometimes dress up like justice and turn out to be fire. He wanted cold, not heat. He wanted a single straight line drawn with a steady hand. He ate a piece of toast with butter because dinner felt like too much, made his tea, and sat at the small table where he usually paid bills on Saturday mornings. He slid the kitchen drawer open, took out his old spiral notebook with the red cover cracked at the corners, and wrote 3 plain words: bank, lawyer, Monday. Under that, he wrote a name, Maya, with a little dot beside it, the way he always marked what mattered. He had watched Maya carry a toddler stroller down the front steps for her mother, and then wheel the empty stroller back up so her mother would not have to lift it. And he had heard her talk about UDC and night classes and nursing and the price of books, and he had seen her hold a door for him when his hands were full of groceries and say, "Yes, sir." Like respect lived in her mouth every day. He would not write what he planned yet, not even in his own notebook. But the shape of the plan already stood in the room, quiet and correct, like a chair somebody had moved to the right spot at last. When the tea was gone, he washed the cup, dried it with the thin towel he liked, set it in the rack, and finally reached for the safe. He lifted it down, set it on the bed, and tapped the familiar 6 numbers. The lock clicked like a small door opening in a larger one. He did not count the checks. He knew their count by heart. Tax refund by tax refund, bonus by bonus, overtime by overtime, 5 years stacked like bricks, and he did not touch the bond. He looked only long enough to remind himself that the thing existed because he had made it exist. Then he closed the lid, turned the knob, slid the safe back where it lived, and felt his breathing steady. He returned to the table, wrote one more word under the list, quiet, and underlined it. He would not shout, he would not argue online, he would not post a thing. He would let the city move, slow and sure, while he set his pieces where they needed to be. Outside his window, a trumpet down the block tried the same phrase 3 times and finally found the right note. Henry smiled at the sound, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed with the kind of calm that knows exactly what morning is for. Henry did not sleep long after he wrote the words in his red notebook. He lay on his side with the window cracked, listened to a siren slide down 14th Street, and watched the orange glow of a street lamp spread across the ceiling like a slow-moving tide. Then he rose before dawn because old habits do not ask your permission. Boiled water, made oatmeal with a pinch of salt the way his sister taught him, and set the bowl on the table where he always paid bills on Saturdays. He moved the bowl aside and pulled out a neat stack of envelopes, the ones he had saved whenever he transferred money to the college fund, each stamped and dated, each little proof that he had not just paid bills, but had done the quiet work of building a bridge a child could cross. He did not rush. He sorted them by year, clipped them with a binder clip, and wrote a simple label on a sticky note, "College fund deposits, 5 years, Henry only?" Then he opened the shallow drawer where his old printer paper lived and found the plastic sleeves he used when something needed to be kept safe. He slid the envelopes into 2 sleeves and snapped them shut, and the soft click felt like the sound a man hears when he sets a plan in place and knows it will not wobble. The morning moved into full light, and with it came the small noises of an apartment building waking up. The elevator cables thudding once, a neighbor's door closing, a radio playing an old go-go track low enough to be polite. Henry washed his bowl, wiped the counter in slow circles, and put on his gray jacket because even warm days in D.C. can cool inside banks where the air is always just a touch too cold. He checked his Metro card again, even though he knew it had money on it. Slipped the red notebook into his jacket pocket and paused at the door when his phone buzzed on the table. It was a message in the old family group chat he rarely used now. A photo of Kay on Renee's porch, mortarboard tilted, arm thrown around Carl, both of them holding up paper cups like a pair of champions, captioned with 3 words that were supposed to be a joke but read like a verdict. Real dad, finally. Henry stood still and looked at the picture long enough to feel nothing at all. Then he turned the phone face down and left it on the table, locked his door, and took the stairs because the elevator felt too close today. He did not go straight to the bank. He walked first, the long way, down 14th toward U Street, past the storefront with the hand-lettered sign that said, "We fix shoes and memories." Past the barbershop where men argued kindly about the Wizards. Past the mural bright with faces he could name and faces he could not. He liked the rhythm of the city in the morning, when people hurry with purpose and dogs look proud to be awake. He stopped at the corner to let a mother carry a sleeping toddler across, then crossed behind her and turned toward a small hardware store that opened early. Inside, the aisles smelled like dust and oil and hope, and he bought a new padlock for a metal storage box in his closet. Not because the old one was broken, but because he wanted a clean, unused lock that had not yet failed him, even in small ways. He put the padlock in his pocket, folded the small paper receipt in half, and wrote the date on it with the store pen. Then stepped back onto the sidewalk with the sense that everything around him was walking in the same direction as he was. He reached the bus stop and took the 52 down to L Street because it was Saturday and the bank would shorten its hours, and he did not like to cut things close. On the bus, he sat in the side-facing seat near the rear door and watched the city slide by like pages in a book. People stepping in and out, carrying coffees and plants and rolled-up yoga mats. A teen in a graduation gown squeezed on with 2 friends, laughing, breathless, trying to hold the cap with one hand and a bouquet with the other. He smiled at them without letting it turn his face soft. At the bank, he did not try to explain anything to the teller yet, because the lawyer came first on Monday, but he asked for a simple printed statement for the college account that began with the first deposit 5 years ago and ended the previous week. The teller, a young man with careful hair and a name tag that read, Luis, printed it and slipped it into a stiff folder, and Henry thanked him by name, because names matter when the rest of the world wants to call you sir without looking at you. Outside, he bought a half smoke from a street cart and ate it standing up, neat and slow, a habit he learned years ago when he worked long days and meals were simple and earned. The mustard stung his nose just a little, and it cleared the fog in his head. By late morning, he was back in his apartment, and the quiet wrapped around him like a coat. He placed the bank folder next to the sleeves of deposit envelopes and the sticky note labels. Then he opened the hall closet and lifted down a low metal box that held old school projects and folded programs from middle school concerts. He sat on the floor with the box in front of him and went through it one piece at a time, because a man can be both exact and tender in the same hour. He found Kay's 7th grade science fair poster, the one about soil acidity and bean plants, edges softened from years in the closet. He remembered cutting out the letters with Kay at the table, Kay yawning, Kay reaching for the glue, Kay complaining about the smell, and the way Kay's face lit when the teacher said, "Nice work, young man." He found a flyer from Little League tryouts, the one Kay skipped because he was sick, and Henry sat with him on the couch and watched highlight reels on YouTube instead, pointing out how patience is a skill you can practice. He found the receipt for the winter coat bought out of season on sale, the one that kept Kay warm the next year when the bus was always late, and the wind came at them like a lesson. He held each thing long enough to let it be real, then slipped it back into the box, closed the lid, and stood up carefully because his knees complained now and again. The phone buzzed again, this time a direct text from Renee. "Cookout at Aunt Flora's tomorrow. You should come, it would be nice." And he stared at it without answering because he knew what nice meant in her mouth. It meant controlled, smiling, pretend. He set the phone down and looked out the window at a pair of pigeons on the wire doing their clumsy dance. And he thought about the loose wire above the gym hoop, how it swayed and did not fall. And he wondered how many things in life look like they are about to break, but still hold just long enough to teach you something. He made tea again, this time with a squeeze of lemon, sat down with his red notebook and wrote the time Monday, 9:30, Greer, and Monday, 1, call UDC Bursar. Then he turned the page and wrote Maya. Ask for acceptance letter copy. Ask about book list. Ask about housing wait list. And under that, he printed in small letters, explain rules. No posting, no bragging, no IOUs, except to yourself. Finish what you start. He read the words aloud in a whisper, not for drama, but because hearing a plan makes it feel more real. Afternoon turned to evening slowly. Light softened along the floor, and the city traded its work sounds for weekend sounds. Music drifting from a car, a neighbor laughing too loudly, a ball thumping in the alley. Henry changed into a clean white shirt and a light sweater because the evening would cool, tucked the padlock package into his back pocket, and walked to the corner store where the clerk always called him Unc, and tried to overfill the paper bags. He bought dish soap, rice, and a pack of printer ink because he would need to print a form or two. And he stopped by the bulletin board near the door where people pin flyers. He saw one for a neighborhood tutoring group that needed volunteers, tore off a tab with the number and slid it into his wallet. Outside, the sky held that deep blue that happens right before the darkness takes over. And he stood for a minute just to breathe it in, because he knew tomorrow would be filled with eyes and questions, and the kind of talk that tries to make a wound seem small. And he wanted to arrive with his breath steady. Back home, he replaced the old padlock on the metal box, not because anyone would try to open it, but because the act said to him, "I am careful." Then he washed the rice and set it to simmer, made a small pan of beans with onions, and ate a simple bowl at the table with the window open and the city humming below. When he finished, he washed the dishes, wiped the table, and placed the bank folder and the sleeves back into the safe with the envelope he had already counted in his head. He closed the safe and spun the dial until it stopped on nothing at all, then put the safe back on the shelf, tugged the towel stack forward to hide it the way he always does, and turned off the closet light. Night came. He did not turn on the television. He sat in his chair with a paperback and read 3 pages without remembering a word, because his mind moved along a single, straight path that would not be pulled aside by noise. He set the book down, reached for the red notebook one more time, and wrote a final line for the day. Tomorrow, go, sit, listen, say little, because he would go to Aunt Flora's cookout, not for reconciliation, not for performance, but to let the truth do its quiet work in a place where people could see without him pointing. Then he closed the notebook, set it on the table, turned off the lamp, and let the dark settle, calm and complete, as if the whole city had agreed to hold its breath with him until morning. Henry woke to Sunday sun moving across his curtains like a quiet river, made coffee the slow way in his old kettle, and sliced 2 apples to pack with the bowl of potato salad he had promised Aunt Flora years ago he would always bring. Then he dressed in a clean white shirt and his light gray jacket because DC parks can be warm in the open and cool in the shade. He checked the red notebook, tapped the lines that said, Greer, Monday 9:30, and call UDC Bursar, 1, slid the notebook into his pocket, and locked his door with the soft click that always told him his day had started right. The bus down 16th Street rolled by churches with open doors and voices rising, by row houses with porch flags, by men setting up folding tables for chess, and the city looked like a place that wanted to be kind if people let it. He stepped off at Meridian Hill Park, climbed the steps slow and steady, and found Aunt Flora's spot near the long fountains where water fell like a patient song. She hugged him tight, said, "You look sharp, Henry," and pointed to a table already crowded with foil pans and paper plates. He set his bowl down and breathed in charcoal and summer and the pepper smell from a cousin's grill. Then he took a chair a little away from the center so his back could rest and his eyes could see. People came in waves, cousins and friends and the usual neighbors who count as family, and the talk was easy at first. Who brought what? How hot it might get? Whether the gnats would ever find their swing again? The way every June afternoon begins before the hard words arrive. Renee appeared later than the rest. Bright yellow dress, sunglasses pushed up, smile arranged like a picture frame, and Kay moved 2 steps behind her in a fresh t-shirt and new sneakers that glowed too white for grass. Carl strolled in with a cooler he claimed was heavy, though he made sure everyone saw him carry it, and he clapped men on the shoulders as if they had asked for it. Henry watched without staring and lifted his paper cup when anyone caught his eye, because respect does not need speeches. The first nudge came from Uncle Ray, who always asked the wrong thing first. "So, Kay, how's dorm life?" And the words hung like a ball tossed too high. Kay glanced at Renee, paused, said, "Good, good," and looked down at his phone, and Henry noticed the way Renee's hand fluttered once then smoothed her dress, a small storm that ended before rain. Cousin Dot tried next, sweet as ever. "You pick your major yet?" And Kay opened his mouth then closed it, and for a second the park sounds grew louder. The water, the squeals of kids, the pop of a soda can, because silence always gives the world its microphone. Renee jumped in, voice bright as glass. "We're handling some admin stuff. You know how schools are, so slow." And she laughed too high and too long, and a few people laughed with her because they wanted to help. But laughter cannot carry the weight of a lie for very long. Carl leaned on the cooler with both hands like he was bracing a story. "Kids these days, schools always mess it up." And he looked at Henry as if to measure how far the words might travel. Henry sipped his tea and said nothing, the choice that gives truth room to walk on its own legs. Aunt Flora, who misses nothing, came to stand by Henry's chair and asked softly, "You doing all right, baby?" And Henry nodded, "I'm steady," which was the kind of answer people trust from an old man who does not use extra words. The day moved forward. Plates filled and emptied, the sun shifted, and still the talk bent back toward the same fence until finally a teenager, not family, a neighbor boy with a clear voice, said, "I saw that graduation clip on my feed." And he did not mean harm. He meant the regular curiosity of a city where news hops from phone to phone. A few heads turned, and someone near the grill murmured, "It was rough." And someone else said, "It was a joke, right?" And then quiet arrived, the kind that touches each person and asks for the truth. Renee broke first. It was nothing. Then it was a moment. Then it was taken out of context. And each line arrived thinner than the one before it. Aunt Flora set down her tongues, wiped her hands on a towel, and looked at Renee the way a church elder looks at a child who forgot her verse. "Baby, there was context. We all heard it, and you clapped." And the words were simple, not sharp, and that made them sharper. Carl tried to chuckle it away. "You know how kids are." And Kay said, "We didn't mean it like that." And their voices touched the edges of the group, but did not reach the center, because meaning lives in what you say when you think the people who fed you are too far back to hear. Henry stood at last, not for a speech, not for a scene, just to stretch his legs and place his cup in the trash. People made a path, because they always do for a gentle man, and he said one line so even it sounded like a level placed on a board. "Jokes are cheap," then added, "Futures are not." And he nodded to Aunt Flora, to the cousin at the grill, to the 2 boys playing tag, and began to walk toward the steps. Behind him, someone called his name. Not loud, not angry, just the old habit of calling the man who always knows where the spare batteries are. And he lifted his hand once and kept going because sometimes the lesson needs space to land. On the path, a little girl in braids stared at him like he was in a storybook, and he winked and she smiled. And he thought of how many times in 15 years he had knelt to tie a shoe or read a line twice so a new reader could hear it right. At the top of the stairs, he paused to breathe and look back, water falling in sheets, sunlight catching the spray, Renee staring at the ground, Kay scuffing his 2 white shoes in the grass, Carl talking to no one in particular, and Aunt Flora handing someone a plate like the world can be fixed one serving at a time. He took the bus home in the soft part of the afternoon, sat by the window, watched a cyclist glide past the line of cars, watched a man carry a lamp wrapped in a towel, watched the city keep moving as if it knew that stillness can be a decision and a strength. In his apartment, he rinsed his bowl, put it away, set his jacket on the back of the chair, and took out the red notebook. He wrote, "Cookout," said little, "Truth moved," and under that, "Be ready, calls will come." Then he closed the book and let his hands rest flat on the table until the small tremble that lived there most days went quiet. Evening brought a thin breeze, and the sound of a trumpet 2 buildings over trying the same line until it got it right. His phone buzzed with a new message from Renee. "Brunch tomorrow? Bus boys? Just us, please." And he read it and set the phone face down because he had already decided he would meet her in a public place where chairs and silverware and waiters keep the temperature of words low. He boiled water for tea, added a slice of lemon, and thought of the page for Monday. Greer at 9:30, UDC Bursar at 1, Maya at 4 if she could get away from her shift, and the list felt like a straight road with clear paint. When the tea was gone, he washed the cup, drew the blinds halfway, and stood at the closet to look at the towel stack without moving it, telling himself that the safe did not need checking because the plan was not about the feeling of the paper, but about the direction of the days. He turned off the light and sat in his chair by the window so he could see the sky darken over the row of roofs, heard a couple laugh in the hall, heard a child protest bedtime, then surrender, and he let the city settle around him like an old coat. When he finally rose for bed, he spoke out loud to the empty room in a voice that did not ask for anyone's permission. "Be quiet, be clear, be kind, and be done." Then he lay down and slept the steady sleep of a man who knows tomorrow will bring talk and tests and a table where he will keep his hands open and his answers few. While the deeper work moves forward, in the places where papers are signed and a young woman's steps towards school begin to sound like a new kind of music. Henry arrived at Busboys on the 14th, a little before 8, the sidewalks still damp from the street cleaners and the big front windows catching a soft gray light that made the room feel calm. He chose a small table near the book wall so they would have something solid behind them, and so a server could pass by if voices tried to rise. Then he folded his hands and waited with the patience of a man who has stood in longer lines than this. Renee came in at 8 on the dot, sunglasses on her head like a crown, a careful smile already in place, and she sat without asking, reached across to touch his hand, and started the story she had practiced on the drive over. "Yesterday was messy, Henry, but you know Kay, he's dramatic, he's a kid, we all say things in moments." And she let out a light laugh that did not land anywhere. Henry listened, nodded once, and when the server asked for orders, he asked only for coffee, and she asked for a mimosa and something with eggs and a long description. When the server left, she tilted her head, softened her voice, and pressed the part that mattered to her. "We've always been a team with the paperwork and the deadlines, and there's timing with the deposit." So she paused to let the words so sit like a fishing line over still water. "You'll handle it like you always do?" He took a slow drink that gave him space to choose the smallest true words, then said, "Of course, because sometimes of course means I will take care of it, and sometimes it means I will take care of what needs taking care of." She relaxed at once, relief softening her shoulders, and she began to rewind their history for him. The asthma night, the binder hunt, the calculators, all of it told as if memory could turn debt back into love. He did not argue with memory. He set a 20 under the cup when the check came, stood and said, "I have an appointment," which was also true. On the sidewalk, the air had already warmed, buses groaned past, and a man set a crate of peaches in the shade. Henry walked south to the metro, took the red line 2 stops, and reached the low brick building where Greer kept her office behind a door with a neat brass plate. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of paper and lemon oil, and at 9:30 exactly, Greer waved him in, gray hair like wire, eyes clear, desk already set with a stack of forms and a legal pad. "You brought documentation," she said, and he set down the sleeves of stamped envelopes, the bank folder, and his red notebook, then said the thing that put the day on its rail. I want to establish a trust, beneficiary Maya Ortiz, funds to be dispersed directly to the University of the District of Columbia for tuition and fees, with allowances for books and basic housing. No cash transfers to the student. If she leaves school, the remainder stays until she returns or until 5 years pass. If 5 years pass, the remainder goes to the UDC emergency grant pool in her name. Greer listened without interrupting, then asked 3 short questions: proof of identity, scope of control, successor trustee, and he answered each with the same plain tone. They wrote the trust name, Brookland Education Trust, because names matter on paper and in the mouth. And she called the bank manager she knew 3 blocks away, then arranged a meeting at 11 to move the money cleanly. Before Henry left, Greer said, "You are certain?" And he said, "I am." And that settled the only part that ever really needed settling. At the bank, the manager met them in a glass-walled room that kept sound in, but did not hide anything. Henry signed a withdrawal for the full balance of the college account and watched the numbers change on the screen with the calm of a man who has counted every deposit in his head already. The manager printed the confirmation slip, stamped it, and slid it across. Henry put it in his notebook, then authorized the transfer into the new trust account and a same-day payment to UDC's bursar office for the fall term under Maya's student ID. While the bank processed the wire, Henry asked for a second payment to a small campus housing deposit and signed that too. The manager nodded, impressed by the neatness of it, and said, "You'll get alerts." And Henry said, "Good, because alert is just another word for proof." Outside, noon heat sat on the steps like a thick coat. Henry crossed into a patch of shade, dialed the bursar's office, and spoke to a clerk who sounded busy but kind. He gave the trust name, the wire confirmation, Maya's ID, and asked for a written receipt to be emailed to both the trust address and Maya's address. The clerk said, "We'll post it by end of day," and Henry said, "Thank you," and meant it. It was near 1 now, so he walked to a corner diner, ate a tuna sandwich and a cup of soup he had not planned on, and wrote 3 notes in the red book: trust funded, receipts in folder, send Maya, rules, contacts, calendar, and on a new line, remain quiet. At 4, he waited outside a coffee shop near Howard where buses hiss and students stream past with headphones and plans. Maya arrived 3 minutes early in a plain blue blouse and the careful look of somebody who does not want to hope too hard. He stood, held the door, and they sat by the window. He slid the folder to her. Trust summary, first term paid receipt, housing deposit note, a simple letter that started with, "You earned this," and watched her read. She read each page with both hands on the paper like it might blow away. Twice she looked up as if to ask if this was a trick. And twice she did not ask because she had learned to hold questions until answers arrive. When she finished, she whispered, "Why me?" And he said, "Because you never asked. Because I have watched you work. Because you hold doors and carry strollers and speak softly to your mother. Because school costs money and pride costs more when you have to beg for it." And she put a hand over her mouth and nodded once. He told her the rules. No posting about the trust, no trying to pay him back, no letting anyone tell her this was luck. He told her the number for Greer if something snarled at the registrar. He told her the calendar dates he had written down. Orientation fees, book orders, a reminder 2 weeks before the ad drop window closed. And he told her she could call him if a problem was simple and she needed an ear. She said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Call me Henry." And that made her smile. They stepped outside into the gold of late afternoon and she hugged him quick and careful, then left with the folder in a tote bag held close. He watched her disappear into the crowd and felt no heat, only a steady cool that fit his bones. When he reached home, he set the red notebook on the table, placed the stamped withdrawal slip inside the front cover, and wrote, "Done." Then under that, "Renee will call. Answer only once." Because the mystery was not about where the money went. Paper tells that story perfectly. But about how silence would do its work when the emails from admissions reached a kitchen across town. He watered the fern, opened the window an inch, and stood for a long minute in the small house, good quiet of his apartment, while the city outside kept moving, the way it always does when a man decides his line and walks it, straight and without noise. Henry spent orientation morning the way he liked to spend any busy day he knew would not belong to him. He made coffee, watered the fern, wiped the small kitchen table until it felt smooth under his palm, and set his red notebook in the center with a pen resting on top. He put his phone face down so the screen would not decide how he felt. Then he opened the window an inch to let in the slow city air. By noon, the heat pressed on the glass, and the street below sounded like summer. Bus brakes sighing, a bicycle bell, a radio from a passing car, and Henry stood in the doorway and watched the light move along the floor. At 12:47, the first call came, Renee's name bright on the screen, and he let it ring twice before he answered because he had written "answer only once" in the book, and he wanted control of his voice. She did not say hello. She said, "They won't process Kay's ID. Housing says the deposit bounced," and her words stacked fast, one on another. "They're acting like we didn't pay. This is humiliating." And Henry said calmly, "I hear you." Then, "It sounds hard." Then he added the line he had chosen yesterday because short lines keep doors from opening to the wrong rooms. "Talk to Carl," and he told her he would be home later and hung up. The phone shook itself to life again, then again. Texts from Kay, "They're saying tuition isn't paid. They won't give me a key. And, alas, this is on you." And Henry typed 3 words that made his hands steady. "Talk to Carl." He ate a sandwich standing at the counter, washed the plate, and sat with his red notebook open to the page that read, "Remain quiet." He kept his eyes on the ink until his breathing matched the slow rhythm of the ceiling fan. At 3:10, the pounding on the door started. Not knocking, but sharp, rushed hits that made the frame tremble. And Henry went to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw Renee with her hair frizzed from the heat, and Kay behind her, jaw tight, eyes hot, a pair of sunglasses clenched in his fist like he wanted to break something that would not matter if he broke it. Henry opened the door and stepped aside because he did not enjoy making a threshold into a stage. Renee came in first, words already lit. "They said there is no payment on file. They said the account was closed. Henry, what did you do?" And Kay followed, voice louder. "I'm standing in a hallway like a fool because of you." And Henry pointed to the table and said, "Sit." And because he said it the way a man says it, who has told you to sit before when you were small and confused, they sat. He did not sit right away. He went to the drawer, took out the folder the bank manager had stamped, and placed the folded slip on the clean table between them. Then he put his red notebook next to it and kept his hand on the cover. Renee stared. "What is this?" And he said, "A record." And she unfolded it with both hands and read the words and numbers that tell a story cleanly, then looked up at him with a face that moved from anger to worry to something like fear. "You emptied it," she said, not a question. Henry nodded once. Kay leaned forward. "Why?" And Henry kept his voice even. "After graduation, you thanked your real dad and called me a loser who pays bills," he said. "So I stopped paying. I chose where the money would go because I earned it and I saved it, and it has my name on every deposit." And he tapped the sleeves of stamped envelopes he had brought from the safe and laid them beside the slip. 5 years, my deposits, my receipts, my taxes. You may be angry, but you should not be surprised. Renee's mouth worked around words she had used on other days to move him. We, team, just a moment, kids, and none of them fit now. Kay tried a different angle. "It was a joke," he said. "We didn't mean it," and Henry shook his head, very small. "You meant it when you said it," he answered. "Words are like nails. Once you drive them, pulling them out leaves holes." And he turned the notebook so they could see the line from last week written in his neat hand. Bank, lawyer, Monday. "We'll sue," Renee said, voice low, like a threat she wanted to believe had a shape, and Henry gestured to the stack. "The account is in my name. The fund was seeded by my paychecks, my bonuses, my refunds. The letters from your side say thank you, but do not include your money. You can speak to a lawyer, but the lawyer will read the same things you are reading now." Kay stood like he might leave, then sat again because standing did not give him anything to hold. Henry watched him and felt a slow ache that had nothing to do with the room they were in, and everything to do with the rooms he had sat in with this boy. School offices, clinics, barber chairs, teaching him how to wait without anger. "What am I supposed to do?" Kay asked, and the question landed softer because it was finally a question and not a demand. Henry kept his voice kind. "You can call the man you thanked," he said. You can ask him for help. He will have the chance to do for you what you asked him to do on that stage. And he let the sentence sit. Renee pressed her fingers to her temples and whispered, "Please, Henry." And he looked at her and saw not the woman from brunch, but a tired mother who had believed the world would not change because it had not changed yesterday. And he said, "I hope you find a path. I am not your path any longer." And he stood to signal that the meeting was over. The room went very quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and a bus outside letting off air. Kay pushed his chair back hard enough to scrape the floor and walked to the door, then turned as if he needed one more try. "Who did you give it to?" And Henry met his eyes and said, "To someone who asked for nothing and works for everything." And the mystery landed where it needed to, not as a taunt, but as a line the boy could think about later. Renee rose more slowly, and took a breath that shook and said, "You're embarrassing us." And Henry said, "I have not raised my voice all week." Then added, "Because truth without sharpness sometimes teaches better. The truth is doing the work." He opened the door for them and stepped aside. In the hallway, a neighbor passed with a bag of laundry and looked down, polite, quick-eyed, the way people look when they feel heat and decide not to walk into it. Kay walked ahead, shoulders square in the way of a young man who wants the world to know he is fine. Renee paused, turned back like she might say one more thing, then did not. Henry closed the door gently, returned the stamped papers to the folder, slid the folder into the safe, and spun the dial until it pointed at nothing. He washed his hands at the sink for no good reason except that he wanted to mark the end of the talk, dried them on the thin towel he liked, and sat at the table with his notebook. He wrote, "They came, showed slip, said little." And under that, next, Aunt Flora's, "Eyes will be on us." And then, because he knew the day would not be still, he turned his phone face up and watched 2 new messages arrive from numbers he did not know. One a cousin. "What happened?" The other a neighbor. "Saw a post about you helping a girl. Is that true?" And he smiled without showing teeth, because the city carries stories along like a river carries leaves, and the right stories have a way of bumping the right banks. He closed the notebook, poured himself a glass of water, and sat very still until the pounding in his chest slowed to the steady beat of a man who had done exactly what he wrote he would do. No more and no less. Henry arrived early to Aunt Flora's June cookout at Meridian Hill Park, carrying his usual bowl of potato salad and a sleeve of paper cups because he liked to bring something useful. And he chose a chair near the long fountains where the water fell in patient steps so he could rest his back and see the whole lawn. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass, and the park was already busy. Toddlers chasing bubbles, teenagers balancing on the low wall, an older man tapping a quiet beat on a drum as if warming the day. Henry set his bowl on the long table, wiped his hands on a napkin, and took a slow walk around the circle of folding chairs, nodding to cousins and neighbors, answering the same gentle question with the same gentle answer. "I'm steady," until the words felt like a comfortable coat. By noon, the sun had pushed the shade back from the grass, and Aunt Flora had the grill going in neat rows. Hot dogs first, then chicken, and she moved like a conductor, handing tongues to one cousin, foil to another, watching everything without staring, the way matriarchs do. Renee arrived late, bright dress, sunglasses perched high, smile pinned on, and Kay shadowed her with restless steps, new sneakers white as porcelain. Carl followed with a cooler he pretended was too heavy, offering laughs as if they were currency. Chatter rose when they came through the path because news travels faster than people in a family. And Henry felt the shift before anyone said a word. He lifted his paper cup to Aunt Flora, who returned the small salute, then settled back in his chair with his palms flat on his thighs and his eyes on the water where sunlight broke into coins at every ledge. It started the way these things start, by accident, and then on purpose. Uncle Ray asked Kay how dorm life had begun. Purely curious, and Kay stalled, looked at Renee, said, "It's fine," too quick, and looked down. Cousin Dot tried to help with a softer question about classes, and Renee laughed a little too high. "Administrative hiccups," she said. "You know schools," and the words sat wrong, light words carrying a heavy box. Then teenagers near the fountain whispered to each other, and one of them, braver than his years, nodded at Renee and said, "I saw that graduation clip." and the line cut the air. A few people looked away, a few leaned in, and Aunt Flora set down her tongues like a gavel. It might have passed, but nothing passes when shame is already pacing the yard. So Renee turned in a slow circle as if addressing a committee and said louder than she needed, "Let's stop pretending. Henry emptied the college fund, every cent, after everything we've done for him." And her voice shook on the last word, the kind of shake that invites a crowd to choose sides. The lawn went quiet in a way that changes what quiet means. Even the fountain sounded closer. One cousin cleared his throat, another stared at the grill like it might answer for him. And then Aunt Flora, who misses nothing and allows less, stepped forward with a dish towel in her hand and said in a calm, level voice that could carry across a sanctuary without a microphone, "Baby, the whole class heard what Kay said at graduation." And she turned her head toward Kay, not to accuse, but to include him in the truth. "And you clapped," she added to Renee, and the words did not attack, they arranged. Carl opened his mouth, closed it, and bent to fuss with the cooler's latch. Kay found a spot on the grass with his shoe and ground at it like he could erase a mark no one else saw. Finally, Kay tried. It was a joke, and the word joke sounded small in the big yard. A neighbor Henry barely knew said, "Not loud, just honest." Didn't sound like one online. And then the teenagers nodded, and the slow wave of ordinary witness moved through the chairs. No shouting, just the soft weight of people seeing what they saw. Henry stood. Not fast, not slow, just in the way of a man whose bones ask for a stretch. He carried his cup to the trash, turned back to the group, and said a single even line. "Jokes are cheap, futures are not." Then he looked at Kay long enough to be sure the words reached him and added, "You thanked your real father. You that gives him the chance to be real." And the sentence landed without smoke. "Where did you put the money?" someone asked from the far side of the table, and Henry kept his gaze quiet and said, "With someone who asked for nothing and works for everything." And he did not say Maya's name because he had promised her a clean start, and mystery, today, was not theater. It was protection. Renee flinched at that and stepped toward him, finger raised like a conductor who had lost the sheet music. "You're embarrassing me," she said, and Henry shook his head once. "I have not raised my voice all week," he replied, and two aunties nodded because truth without volume is its own kind of bell. The group shifted as if a breeze had moved through, even though the air was still. People began to see the shape of the thing, like a photograph coming up in a tray. Years of quiet deposits, a speech with a hurtful sentence, a door that closed softly instead of slamming. Aunt Flora picked up the tongues again and said, "Eat while it's hot." And that was mercy disguised as logistics, because it gave everyone something to do with their hands. Henry thanked her with a small look and set his empty cup on the table. Kay walked over then, not as loud, more like a boy who had finally felt the full weight of his own words. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked. And there was no demand in it, only a question. Henry answered with the same steady tone he had used for years when teaching Kay how to tie a tie or fix a leaky faucet. "Call the man you thanked," he said. "Give him the same chance you gave me for 15 years. And he did not say, "I hope he shows," because hope is soft and today needed bone. Carl straightened then, as if summoned, and said, "I'll see what I can do." And the sentence sounded like a man checking his pockets for cash that was not there. A cousin coughed. A neighbor looked at his shoes, and the park's ordinary life began again in small ways. Someone refilled the lemonade. Someone chased a napkin that blew off a plate. The drummer by the steps set an easy rhythm that made children sway. Henry took this as his cue, because leaving on time is part of telling the truth. He thanked Aunt Flora for the best chicken, which is what he always said because it was always true. Shook 3 hands, patted one little boy on the head, and started toward the steps. He did not hurry. He did not linger. When Renee called his name once, not a plea, not a command, just a habit, he lifted a hand without turning and kept walking. At the top of the stairs, he paused to look back, not at faces, but at the water catching sun in thin sheets and falling, relentless and calm. And he thought, truth is like this if you let it be. No shouting, just gravity. On the bus, he sat by the window and watched the city slip past. A man wheeling a new fan out of a shop, a girl carrying a box of cupcakes carefully, a dog tugging toward a shady patch. and he let his breathing find the same slow count as the lights that passed across his sleeve. At home, he washed the bowl, set it to dry, and opened his red notebook. He wrote, "Cookout," R named it. "Family saw, said little, left on time." Then added a short line under it, "Mystery holds, because the right kind of not saying can be kindness." He closed the book, set it on the table, and stood at the window for a long, even minute, listening to the city hum like a machine he understood, feeling the cool of his choice sit in his bones, and knowing that tomorrow would bring a new kind of noise from somewhere he could not see yet, and that he would meet it the same way he had met today, with steady hands, simple words, and the clean edge of a line he would not step over. Henry woke on Monday to a phone buzzing on the table and a strip of sun on the floor. He put on his glasses, turned the screen, and saw a post from the Ward 1 community group. A photo of Maya in a thrift store blazer standing in front of a dorm with a box of books, her mother's caption, simple and proud. "My daughter got a second chance because a neighbor chose kindness. Thank you, Mr. Henry. You owed us nothing." The picture was not flashy. There were no hashtags. But the comments began to stack. Teachers, the building super, a clerk from the corner store, a choir friend from years ago. "That girl works harder than anyone. Mr. Henry always shows up. Now that's how you do it." Henry read for a minute, then put the phone face down because praise, like anger, can run too hot if you hold it too close. He made coffee. He watered the fern. He opened the red notebook and wrote 2 lines. "Maya, remind about book list." And under it, "Stay quiet." He printed the receipts the bank had emailed the night before and slid them into the folder with the stamped withdrawal slip. At 9, he walked to the bus, rode down to 7th Street, and let the chatter of a Monday city wash past. Delivery trucks backing up, school kids late and laughing, a man balancing a ladder on his shoulder. At the bank, he asked for a copy of the trust statement with the new balance and the posted payment to UDC. The teller printed it, stamped it, and tucked it into a stiff cover. Henry thanked him by name. He stepped back outside and felt the heat settle on his shoulders like a warm coat. He decided to buy peaches at Eastern Market because the stand on the corner always had good ones on Mondays, and he liked to reward small habits that made a life feel steady. The market was busy. Tourists with maps, neighbors with lists, a street musician working a soft version of Ain't No Sunshine. Henry chose 6 firm peaches and paid in cash. He had just set the bag on the bench to tie it tighter when he heard his name called across the crowd, sharp and too loud. He turned. Renee stood 10 feet away, hair a little wild, sunglasses in one hand, phone in the other, eyes red like she had slept 2 hours and argued for 3. She did not stop at the edge of the space, but walked straight to him so fast that people stepped aside, and she said, "Please," before any other word. For a second, Henry saw the woman he had carried groceries with on rainy nights, the one who could tell a joke that saved a heavy day, and then the present pushed in. "They would not clear Kay," she said, voice shaking. "Megan from admissions said there is nothing on file. He can't even get a student ID. I called, I emailed, I begged." And she swallowed and tried again, lower. "Please, don't do this to us." The crowd felt it, the moment when private trouble turns public, and the sound of the market softened. A vendor paused with a stack of paper bags in her hands. A couple at the flower stall looked down and then up again. Henry kept his voice even. "I am not doing anything to you," he said. "I stopped doing everything for you." Renee touched his sleeve like someone reaching for a railing on a moving bus. "They are your kids," she said, not loud now, only tired. "I was his parent," Henry answered. "That is not the same as the word you used at graduation." She pressed her lips together. Then the words came all at once. "We were wrong. He was wrong. I was wrong. I will make him apologize. I will apologize. Just fix it." Henry looked at the ground for a breath and then at her. "Stand up," he said gently, because she had started to sink. "Take your hands back. Go home. Do the hard thing. Call the man you thanked." She closed her eyes like the sun had suddenly grown brighter, then opened them and nodded once the way a person nods when a slow fact finally lands. Around them, the market resumed its noise in small pieces. The musician missed a note and found the next. A child laughed at a bubble that did not pop. Henry lifted his bag of peaches and stepped aside so she could leave with her head up. She did not at first. She stood there one beat too long. Then pride helped her move her feet. She walked away without another word, and the path closed behind her like water. Henry did not follow. He found a quiet side street, sat on a low wall under a tree, and let his hands stop shaking. He wrote a single line in the notebook, public scene, kept voice low, and then closed it. His phone pulsed again. A new message, not from Renee, not from Kay, but from a number he did not know. Mr. Henry, this is Mrs. Alvarez from 3B. That post about Maya made me cry. Thank you. He typed back, she did the work, and put the phone away. At noon, he walked back toward home. In the lobby, the super was carrying a boxed fan up the stairs. Henry took one end without asking. You see that post? The super asked, breathing hard. Yes, Henry said. Good girl, that one, the super replied. Then added, because buildings are small towns and talk travels, you a good man, and Henry shook his head. Just steady, he said. He ate a sandwich in his kitchen and stared at the folder on the table like it was a calm lake. It reflected everything without speaking. At 2, he called Greer to ask if any more signatures were needed. She said the trust was fully set, paperwork filed, receipts sent, and then she added, in the dry voice of someone who has seen 1,000 human storms, you did it clean. He thanked her and asked her to take any calls from unknown numbers for the next 2 days. She said, I will. At 4, he walked to the community center because the tutoring flyer at the corner store had been on his mind since Saturday. The coordinator, a young man in a neat shirt, explained how Monday evenings worked, homework help, a snack, a half hour of reading. We could use someone steady, the man said, without knowing he had used the exact word Henry trusted most. Henry filled out the volunteer form and chose Thursdays. On his way out, he paused by the glass door and watched a girl at the far table read slowly, finger under each word, lips moving. He remembered Kay at that age. He remembered the pride that showed up when a sentence finally made a picture in a child's head. He went home by way of the park so he could sit on a bench and watch dogs pull their owners toward shady spots. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo message from Maya's mother. Not public, just to him. Maya at a campus desk with a cheap lamp, a small plant, a stack of used books, and a smile that did not ask anyone for permission. First night, the text said. She starts orientation tomorrow. Henry typed, proud of you both. And then, because rules matter, added, please keep details off the internet. Let her study in peace. The reply came quick. Yes, sir. Evening rolled in. Henry washed the peaches and set 2 in a bowl. He left the window open to the sound of traffic and the faint line of a trumpet practicing somewhere on the next block. A neighbor's baby cried, then settled. Someone laughed at a joke Henry could not hear. He opened the red notebook again and wrote 3 lines to steady the week. Thursday, tutoring, 5:30. Friday, check on Maya's book list. Sunday, call Aunt Flora to thank her. He thought about Kay and about the way a boy becomes a man, one refusal at a time. He thought about Renee and the way pride bends and then stands again. He did not think about Carl. Some names do not help a day. The mystery in the neighborhood kept its gentle shape. Most people did not know who the girl was, only that a man had chosen to pay for effort instead of apology. That was enough. When the streetlights blinked on, Henry washed his cup, dried it with the thin towel he liked, and turned off the kitchen light. He stood by the window one more minute and let the city hum hold him. He had not shouted. He had not posted. He had not explained himself more than once. He had done what he wrote he would do on the first page of the red book. In the quiet, he could hear his own breath, slow and even, and the soft scratch of a pencil in the upstairs apartment where a child was doing homework with someone patient. He smiled at the sound, sat down in his chair, and felt the cool settle in his bones like a promise kept. On Tuesday morning, Henry woke before the sun warmed the window glass, made coffee the slow way, and turned the red notebook to a clean page because he liked endings to be written down as plainly as beginnings. He wrote a short list. Bank 10, send book stipend schedule tutoring, through 5:30, call Aunt Flora, Waterfern. Then ate toast, washed his cup, and put on the light gray jacket that made him feel put together without trying. Outside, the city yawned into motion. Delivery trucks at the curb, a jogger crossing against the light, a bus sighing as it took a corner. And he walked to the stop with the steady pace of a man who has decided on his day. The 52 rolled him down 14th, past the hardware store, past the mural that always made him slow his eyes. And he got off near Judiciary Square because the branch there kept its carpet thick and its pens chained short. He arrived early, took a chair near the window, and when the manager called his name, he stood with the folder under his arm like a small, quiet flag. In the glass room, the air was cool, and the table held a neat stack of forms. Final confirmations for the Brooklyn Education Trust, a schedule for book disbursements at the campus store, a note authorizing the bursar to bill fees directly against the trust through the first year. And Henry signed each line with the firm, careful hand of a man who spent years filling out permission slips and tax forms without making a fuss. The manager stamped the pages, slid a copy to him, and said, "One last signature from the student." And Henry nodded because he had asked Maya to meet him there if she could get 10 minutes from work. She came at 10:07, a little out of breath, her blue blouse neat, her hair pulled back, her eyes bright in a way that told the room she wanted this to be real. She signed where the sticky tabs told her, thanked the manager 3 times, and thanked Henry without a speech, just a soft, "I won't waste it," that fit the small space. Henry said, "Buy your books used if you can, save the difference for winter shoes." And Maya smiled like he had handed her a map that included weather. The manager shook both their hands as if he understood more than policy. And then, because institutions like Clarity, handed Henry a stamped receipt that said paid and posted in 2 clean lines. Outside, the sun had climbed, and the city felt like a stove you keep forgetting to turn down. So Henry walked in the shady side of the street toward the bus, the folder tucked close, the morning arranged exactly as he had written it. His phone buzzed once, Renee's name. But he let it go and kept moving because he had decided he would not repeat himself. And the strongest part of a boundary is often the silence that follows it. He rode 2 stops, then stepped off early on purpose to see a block he had not seen in weeks. The old row house where he had fixed leaky pipes and painted trim and carried groceries up 3 steps that always wobbled. The porch sat in the same shade it always had, but a new "for rent" sign leaned crooked against the railing, and the door stood open, a box wedged to keep it from closing. Kay came down the stairs awkwardly with a television in his arms, face set in a way that said the weight was heavier than pride, and Carl stood by the curb, making a show of pointing where the TV should go while holding nothing at all. Renee sat on the plastic chair on the porch in a t-shirt and loose pants, not crying, not waving, just still, her sunglasses on, though the porch was cool. Henry did not slow and did not hurry. He kept to the far side of the sidewalk where the shade was, eyes forward, folder against his ribs. Kay looked up for a second, like he might say something. But the TV shifted and demanded all his attention, and the moment passed without voices. Henry turned the corner, and the street changed to one with a little grocery where the owner still wrote prices by hand, and he went in for rice and onions because doing an ordinary thing after seeing a hard thing helps a heart find its level. Back home, he opened the window, poured rice into a jar, and set the folder on the table where the light touched it. He took out the stamped receipt and slipped it behind the clear sleeve with the original withdrawal slip, so the story could sit in one place from first line to last. His phone buzzed again, not with a call this time, but with a message from the community group. Someone had posted a blurry photo of him and Renee at Eastern Market from yesterday, captioned with questions and guesses, and comments had already started. Is he the one who helped that girl? Mind your business. Kids should show respect. There's more to it. And Henry exhaled quietly because the internet is a room with too many windows. He did not answer. He set the phone face down and went to water the fern, which had turned its fronds toward the good window like always. At noon, he ate a bowl of beans and rice and listened to the soft line of a trumpet practicing 2 buildings over, the player working a phrase until it sat clean on the air. Then he put on his shoes again and walked to the community center because the tutoring coordinator had asked him to stop by to pick up a badge and a packet. The center smelled like soap and pencil shavings and hope. The coordinator handed him a lanyard and said, "We have a girl who struggles with reading. She picks the longest words first." And Henry laughed softly because he had seen that before. Children thinking size equals meaning. "We'll teach her to look for commas and small words," he said, and the coordinator smiled like a man who had been waiting for someone to say exactly that. On his way out, he paused by the glass door and watched two boys argue over a chessboard and then fix the pieces without a grown-up telling them how. Outside, he crossed toward home and saw Mrs. Alvarez from 3B at the bus stop with a bag of laundry and a face that had learned too many schedules. She waved and said, "Maya starts tomorrow." And Henry said, "She'll be fine," because saying it out loud helps a future hear itself. He climbed the stairs in his building instead of taking the elevator because the day had sat in his chest and he wanted to breathe it through his legs. In the hall, a neighbor's door opened and a little boy peered out holding a crayon, then darted back when he saw Henry and then came out again with a shy grin. "Homework?" Henry asked, and the boy nodded. "Keep your letters straight," Henry said, and the boy said, "Yes, sir?" Because respect moves both directions when someone teaches it by example. Late afternoon fell in slow steps across the floor. A breeze found the edge of the curtain. Henry sat at the table and opened the red notebook for the last time that day. He wrote a neat line. Bank, finalized, Maya signed, receipts filed. Then another, saw house for rent, kept walking. And under that, Thursday, be on time, patient voice. Because tutoring would need a different kind of quiet. The kind that bends down to a page and does not leave until a sentence makes a picture. The phone buzzed once more with a message from Kay. Just a single word, why? And Henry looked at it for a long breath and typed back, "So you can learn who helps when you ask." Then put the phone away because enough words had been used for one day. Evening slid in. He washed the cup, set it in the rack, and stood by the open window while the trumpet on the next block found its note and held it a little longer than before. Somewhere a dog barked once and then remembered to be quiet. The city hummed below like a machine he trusted. Henry rested his hands flat on the table, felt the cool of the wood, and let the peace in his bones settle like a stone at the bottom of a clear pool. He had not shouted, he had not run, he had not asked for applause. He had chosen a line and walked it, steady, so that a young woman could cross a bridge built by quiet hands. And so a boy who had called him a loser could discover what happens when the world finally asks him to carry his own weight. The mystery in the neighborhood would remain. Most people would not know her name, and that was good because growth loves shade as much as sun. And Henry, an old man in a small apartment above a street that never really sleeps, smiled once to himself, closed the red notebook, and let the room be simple and true.